On the morning of May 18, 1980, at 8:32 a.m. local time, Mount St. Helens in southwestern Washington state erupted with catastrophic force, forever changing the surrounding landscape and claiming 57 lives. This event stands as the deadliest and most economically destructive volcanic eruption in United States history. Located in the Cascade Range approximately 96 miles south of Seattle and 50 miles northeast of Portland, Oregon, Mount St. Helens transformed from a symmetrical, snow-capped peak, often called the Mount Fuji of America, into a horseshoe-shaped crater with a massive northern breach. The eruption serves as a stark reminder of nature's raw power and unpredictability. Today we're going to examine the factual aspects of the Mount St. Helens eruption, including its geological context, the sequence of events leading to the main blast, and the human toll. Through scientific data and personal testimonies, we can better understand both the physical force and the human experience of this significant natural disaster. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters, where we cover some of the most devastating events that happened throughout history. Mount St. Helens is part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, a segment of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Prior to 1980, the mountain stood at 9,677 feet tall, making it the fifth highest peak in Washington state. The volcano had been dormant since 1857, but was known for periods of activity over its 40,000-year history. Geologically, Mount St. Helens is relatively young compared to other Cascade volcanoes. It formed primarily over the last 2,200 years, with most of its visible cone developing during the last 500 years. The mountain had experienced at least 9 major eruptions prior to 1980, including significant explosive events around 1480 and 1800. Native American stories refer to the mountain as Luala Clough, or Smoking Mountain, indicating their awareness of its volcanic nature. In the months preceding the catastrophic May eruption, scientists from the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, had been monitoring increasing seismic activity around the volcano. By March 1980, they had recorded numerous small earthquakes indicating magma movement beneath the surface. On March 27, 1980, a small steam-driven eruption occurred, marking the beginning of visible volcanic activity. This prompted authorities to establish a restricted red zone around the mountain, though pressure from local businesses and property owners kept this zone smaller than many scientists recommended. The events leading to the catastrophic eruption began with increasing seismic activity in March 1980. Between March 16th and May 18th, more than 10,000 small earthquakes were recorded in the Mount St. Helens area. By late March, a small summit crater had formed and began emitting steam and ash. A key development occurred in April when a noticeable bulge began growing on the mountain's north flank at a rate of approximately 5 feet per day. This bulge, eventually extending about 450 feet outward, indicated that magma was pushing upward and outward within the volcano. Scientists later determined this deformation was essentially the visible manifestation of an enormous, unstable mass developing on the mountainside. On Sunday, May 18th, at 8:32 a.m., a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck beneath the volcano. This seismic event triggered one of the largest landslides in recorded history as the entire, unstable north face of the mountain collapsed. The landslide instantly removed the weight and pressure that had been containing the volatile magma, gas, and steam within the mountain. With this pressure suddenly released, Mount St. Helens experienced a lateral blast, an explosive eruption that shot outward rather than upward. This lateral blast, traveling at speeds up to 300 miles per hour, devastated an area of approximately 230 square miles. The temperature of the blast cloud reached over 600 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly killing all living things in its direct path. Following the lateral blast, a vertical eruption column rose to an altitude of more than 12 miles, spreading ash across 11 different states. The main eruption continued for 9 hours, ejecting more than 540 million tons of ash into the atmosphere. Simultaneously, pyroclastic flows of hot gas, ash, and pumice poured down the mountain's flanks at speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour, while volcanic mud flows traveled down river valleys, destroying bridges and homes. In the days and weeks following the main eruption, Mount St. Helens continued to produce smaller eruptions and ash emissions. By the end of 1980, 22 significant eruptions had occurred, though none approached the scale of the May 18th event. The eruption of Mount St. Helens released energy equivalent to 1,600 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It ejected approximately 0.67 cubic miles of material, reducing the mountain's height by 1,314 feet. The lateral blast created a horseshoe-shaped crater 2 miles wide, 1.5 miles long, and 2,000 feet deep. The force of the explosion leveled 230 square miles of forest in what became known as the blast zone. Within this area, an estimated 4 billion board feet of timber, or enough to build 300,000 two-bedroom homes, was destroyed in moments. The ash cloud from the eruption circled the Earth within 15 days and remained detectable in the atmosphere for months. In total, Mount St. Helens deposited approximately 540 million tons of ash across the United States, with some areas in eastern Washington experiencing complete darkness at midday due to ashfall. Cities as far away as Spokane, Washington, 250 miles from the volcano, were covered in ash, creating respiratory hazards and mechanical problems for vehicles and equipment. The eruption dramatically altered the surrounding landscape. Spirit Lake, once a popular recreational area north of the mountain, was completely transformed. The landslide raised the lake bed by 200 feet and covered it with debris, while thousands of trees were blown into the lake, creating a floating log mat that partially remains today. The water temperatures of the lake rose to near boiling, and the lake's chemistry was fundamentally altered. Rivers draining the volcano, particularly the Tuttle River, were filled with sediment, ash, and debris, causing significant flooding downstream. The mud flows destroyed or severely damaged 27 bridges and approximately 200 homes. Significant portions of State Highway 504 were completely washed away. The official death toll from the eruption stands at 57. The victims came from diverse backgrounds: loggers working in the forests, campers and visitors enjoying the wilderness, property owners checking their cabins after evacuation orders, and scientists monitoring the volcano. Among the most well-known victims was David A. Johnston, a 30-year-old volcanologist with the USGS. Johnston was stationed at an observation post approximately 6 miles from the summit. When the mountain began to collapse, he radioed his famous last words to USGS headquarters saying, quote, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," unquote. His body was never recovered. Another notable victim was Reed Blackburn, a 27-year-old National Geographic photographer who was documenting the volcano from a campsite about 8 miles from the summit. His body was found in his ash-covered vehicle days after the eruption. Harry Truman, an 83-year-old lodge owner who had lived near Spirit Lake for over 50 years, also perished in the eruption. Truman had become something of a folk hero in the weeks before the eruption for his stubbornness and refusal to evacuate despite repeated warnings. His body and the remains of his lodge were buried under hundreds of feet of landslide debris. The victims ranged in age from 20 to 83 and included married couples, family groups, and individuals from various walks of life. Many were in areas considered relatively safe before the eruption's unexpected lateral blasts expanded the zone of destruction far beyond what authorities had anticipated. Survivors and witnesses of the Mount St. Helens eruption provide some of the most compelling perspectives on this natural disaster. Their testimonies convey both the awesome power and the terrifying reality of the event. Keith and Dorothy Stoffel, geologists who were flying in a small plane directly over the summit when the eruption began, provided one of the most extraordinary accounts. Keith Stoffel later reported, quote, The whole north side of the summit crater began to move instantaneously. The nature of movement was eerie. The entire mass began to ripple and churn up without moving laterally. Then the entire north side of the summit began sliding to the north along a deep-seated slide plane. I was amazed and excited with the realization that we were watching this landslide of unbelievable proportions. We took pictures of the avalanche and ensuing eruption for the next few minutes until the ash cloud obscured our view," unquote. Amateur photographer Gary Rosenquist captured a famous sequence of photographs showing the initial collapse and lateral blast while camping with friends at Bear Meadow, about 11 miles northeast of the volcano. As they witnessed the mountain's north face collapse, they realized they were in danger and quickly fled east in their vehicles, narrowly escaping the blast cloud. Robert Rogers, who was camping with his family near Yale Lake, about 25 miles from the volcano, recalled, quote, "We heard this tremendous roar. It sounded like a squadron of jets flying overhead. The sound kept getting louder and louder, and I knew something major had happened. We threw everything in the car and headed out. About 20 minutes later, the ash started falling and it got so dark we had to drive with headlights. It was like driving through a heavy snowstorm, except it was ash, not snow," end quote. Another first-hand account is that of Bruce Nelson, who was fishing on Green River with his friend's 8-year-old daughter Venus when the mountain erupted. Nelson described hearing what sounded like sonic booms, followed by darkness as the ash cloud blocked the sun. He managed to navigate them to safety through the ash-filled air, later learning that they had been just outside the lethal blast zone. The immediate rescue response to the Mount St. Helens eruption faced unprecedented challenges. Ash-filled air grounded helicopters and rescue aircraft for the first crucial hours after the blast. The landscape itself had been so dramatically altered that search and rescue teams could not rely on existing maps to navigate the area. When aerial operations finally began, rescuers encountered a gray, lunar-like landscape devoid of familiar landmarks. Trees that hadn't been completely obliterated were stripped of branches and bark, lying in parallel alignment like matchsticks pointing away from the volcano. These conditions made the search for survivors and victims extremely difficult. Despite these challenges, rescue efforts did save lives. On the day of the eruption, 123 people were rescued from the devastated area, including many who suffered severe burns, respiratory distress, or injuries from flying debris. Search operations continued for weeks, though hope of finding survivors quickly faded after the first day. The recovery of victims' remains presented a significant difficulty. Some bodies were buried under tons of ash and mud, while others were located in areas too dangerous for recovery teams to access. The extreme heat of the blast had caused severe damage to human remains, complicating identification efforts in some cases. Some victims were never found, their bodies likely entombed within the mountain or completely destroyed by the eruption's force. In the aftermath of the eruption, President Jimmy Carter surveyed the devastation and remarked it looked, quote, "more desolate than a moonscape," unquote. The environmental impact was severe and far-reaching, but the area also became a living laboratory for studying ecological recovery after catastrophic disturbance. Against expectations, life began returning to the blast zone remarkably quick. Plants sprouted from buried root systems within weeks of the eruption. Small mammals that had survived in underground burrows emerged to find a transformed world. Within a year, scientists documented the presence of various plant species and animal life returning to the area. In 1982, Congress established the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument, encompassing 110,000 acres around the volcano. Rather than attempt to restore the area to its pre-eruption state, authorities decided to allow natural ecological succession to occur, providing scientists with an unprecedented opportunity to study recovery processes. Economically, the eruption caused damages estimated at over $1 billion, equivalent to approximately $3.7 billion in today's dollars. Tourism in Washington, initially devastated, eventually rebounded as Mount St. Helens became a popular destination for those wanting to witness the eruption's aftermath and ongoing volcanic processes. The eruption also revolutionized volcanology. Lessons learned from monitoring Mount St. Helens led to improved volcanic hazard assessment and monitoring techniques worldwide. For local communities, the eruption represents a divided line in their history. Events are often remembered as happening either before the mountain blew or after. Many residents of southwest Washington have personal stories of where they were when the mountain erupted, creating a shared cultural memory that continues to shape regional identity. The eruption of Mount St. Helens on May 18, 1980 remains the most destructive volcanic event in modern U.S. history. In the span of a few minutes, an iconic mountain was transformed, the surrounding landscape was devastated, and dozens of lives were extinguished. The volcano itself remains active, experiencing periods of dome-building eruptions between 2004 and 2008, reminding us that it is merely dormant, not extinct. The ongoing monitoring of the volcano and the preservation of the surrounding monument area ensure that the lessons of the 1980 eruption continue to inform our understanding of volcanic hazards and ecological recovery. Thanks for watching today's video on this devastating but important historical event. If you found this informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives, and let me know in the comments what other overlooked historical events you'd like to learn about. Until next time, this has been Deadliest Disasters.